You know that argument you won in the shower? That perfect comeback you delivered to someone who wasn't even there? That entire conversation you rehearsed on your drive home, planning exactly what you'll say tomorrow? Yeah, you're not alone. And no, you're not losing your mind. You're doing something your brain was literally designed to do. Welcome. Today, we're breaking down why you practice conversations that never happen, and why that might actually be more normal than you think. Here's the thing. Your brain doesn't know the difference between something you imagine vividly and something you experience. When you rehearse a conversation in your head, the same neural pathways light up as if you were actually having that conversation. You're not just daydreaming, you're training. Psychologists call this mental rehearsal, and athletes do it all the time. They visualize the perfect shot, the perfect move, the exact moment of victory. You're doing the same thing, except instead of scoring a goal, you're trying to survive Thanksgiving dinner with your family, or finally tell your boss what you really think. But why do we do this? Why does your brain insist on playing out scenarios that might never happen? It comes down to something called anticipatory anxiety. Your brain is trying to protect you. It's running simulations. What if they say this? What if I mess up? What if they get angry? Your mind is like a chess player thinking 3 moves ahead, except the game is your life and the stakes feel enormous. By rehearsing the conversation, you're trying to control the outcome. You're trying to feel prepared, because an unprepared conversation feels dangerous. And here's where it gets interesting. Some people rehearse conversations as a form of control. If you grew up in an environment where words mattered a lot, where saying the wrong thing had consequences, your brain learned to be careful. It learned to script, to plan, to never be caught off guard. So now, even when the stakes are low, even when it's just asking your neighbor to turn down the music, your brain treats it like a negotiation, like one wrong word could ruin everything. Psychologists also link this to something called rumination. That's when your brain gets stuck in a loop, replaying the same thoughts over and over. People who ruminate tend to rehearse conversations more, not because they want to, but because their brain won't let them stop thinking about what might go wrong. It's exhausting. You rehearse the conversation 10 times, you feel ready, then the actual conversation happens, and it goes completely differently. And what does your brain do? It starts rehearsing what you should have said instead. But here's something wild. Studies show that people who mentally rehearse conversations tend to be more empathetic, because when you imagine what someone might say, you're putting yourself in their shoes. You're thinking about their perspective, their feelings, their possible reactions. It's not selfish. It's actually a sign that you care deeply about how your words land. You don't want to hurt anyone. You don't want to be misunderstood, so you practice, you edit, you refine. Now, let's talk about the anxiety piece, because for some people, this isn't just preparation, it's a symptom. Social anxiety disorder makes you replay conversations constantly, before they happen and after. You rehearse what you'll say because you're terrified of saying the wrong thing. Then, after the conversation, you replay it 100 times, analyzing every word you said, every facial expression you made, convinced you messed up, even when you didn't. And this cycle keeps you trapped. The more you rehearse, the more pressure you feel. The more pressure you feel, the more you rehearse. But the truth is, most of the conversations you rehearse never happen the way you imagined. People don't say what you expect. The tone shifts, the topic changes, and all that rehearsal, it doesn't always help. Sometimes it makes things worse, because you get so attached to the script in your head that when reality doesn't match it, you freeze, you stumble, you forget what you wanted to say. Because real conversations aren't scripted. They're messy, unpredictable, human. So why can't we stop? Because rehearsing gives us the illusion of control, and humans crave control, especially over things that scare us. Confrontation scares us, rejection scares us, conflict scares us. So we rehearse to feel less afraid. We tell ourselves that if we just find the perfect words, everything will go smoothly. But life doesn't work that way. No amount of rehearsal can control how someone else reacts, and that's the hard part, accepting that some things are out of your hands. Here's something you need to hear.
The conversations you rehearse obsessively are usually the ones that matter least. Think about it. You don't rehearse conversations with your best friend. You don't rehearse what you'll say to your dog because there's no fear there, no judgment, no stakes. But that coworker you barely know, that distant relative, that person you need to set a boundary with, your brain goes into overdrive because unfamiliarity breeds anxiety, and anxiety breeds rehearsal. Psychologists say this is also tied to something called intolerance of uncertainty. Some people can't stand not knowing how something will go. They need to feel prepared for every possible outcome. So they rehearse conversation A, conversation B, conversation C. They plan for every reaction, every curveball, every awkward silence. It's mentally exhausting, but it feels safer than going in unprepared, even though the truth is, you can never be fully prepared for another human being. Now here's where it gets personal. If you're someone who rehearses conversations constantly, ask yourself this: are you rehearsing to prepare, or are you rehearsing to avoid? Because sometimes we rehearse as a way of procrastinating. We tell ourselves we're getting ready, but really we're delaying. We rehearse the conversation so many times that we never actually have it, and that avoidance keeps us stuck. The issue never gets resolved, the words never get said, and the rehearsal becomes a substitute for real communication. But for others, rehearsal is genuinely helpful. It builds confidence, it organizes your thoughts, it helps you figure out what you actually want to say. There's nothing wrong with thinking through a difficult conversation before you have it. The problem comes when the rehearsal never ends, when it loops, when it steals your sleep and your peace. That's when it crosses the line from preparation into anxiety. Let's be honest. Society tells us to be spontaneous, to be authentic, to just say what we feel. But for some people, that's not realistic. Some people need time to process, to think, to find the right words. And that's okay. There's no shame in being someone who needs to prepare. The shame only comes when we judge ourselves for it, when we think everyone else is just naturally good at talking and we're broken because we're not. Here's the thing most people won't tell you. Everyone rehearses conversations sometimes. The difference is frequency and intensity. Some people rehearse once and move on. Others rehearse obsessively for days. And if you're in the second group, it might be worth exploring why. What are you afraid of? What's the worst thing that could happen if you said the wrong thing? And is that fear based in reality, or is it based in past experiences that taught you to be overly careful? Therapists often work with people on this exact issue. They teach something called exposure, which basically means having the conversation without rehearsing. Scary, right? But the goal is to prove to your brain that you can handle uncertainty, that you don't need a script to survive a conversation, that even if you stumble or say something awkward, the world won't end. And over time, that fear starts to lose its power. But here's what's important to understand. If you rehearse conversations, you're not weird, you're not broken, you're not overthinking everything for no reason. Your brain is doing what it thinks is necessary to keep you safe. It learned somewhere along the way that words matter, that preparation matters, that control matters, and now it's just trying to protect you, even if the protection feels more like a prison sometimes. So what do you do about it? First, notice when you're doing it. Catch yourself in the rehearsal loop. Name it. Say to yourself, I'm rehearsing again. That simple act of awareness can break the cycle. Second, set a limit. Give yourself 5 minutes to think through what you want to say, then stop. Trust that you'll figure out the rest in the moment, because you will. You always do. Third, practice having conversations without preparation. Start small. Talk to a stranger in line. Say something spontaneous to a friend. Build your tolerance for uncertainty. And finally, be kind to yourself. If you're someone who rehearses conversations, it's because you care. You care about connection, about being understood, about not hurting people. That's not a flaw. That's beautiful. The goal isn't to stop caring. It's to trust yourself enough that you don't need to control every word. Because the best conversations aren't the scripted ones. They're the real ones, the messy, imperfect, human ones, where you say something clumsy and the other person laughs, where the words don't come out right but the meaning still lands, where you let go of the script and just be present. So, if you're reading this and thinking, that's me, I do this, know that you're not alone. Millions of people rehearse conversations that never happen, and it doesn't make you anxious or weird or broken. It makes you human, a human who wants to get it right, who wants to be heard, who wants to matter. And that's okay. You don't need the perfect words. You just need to show up. The rest will figure itself out.